Braxcast time once again. This is the 35th episode of the Braxcast, and this is going to be a bit shorter in terms of just me going solo with the news because I'm bringing Andrew Rodriguez back onto Braxcast for a nice little interview. But before we get into that interview, I want to go over just a little bit of Rippaverse news going on. There isn't too much since it's more just focusing on what's already been released. Of course, we've got the delays because of Hurricane Milton. We've got SpaceCon coming up next week. I'm sure I'll get into that when those announcements come out next week, which is the 26th. I'm filming this on the 19th. But the first thing is we've got a Blood Roof poster. Of course, it is Halloween season, spooky time for the people who really enjoy horror and all that stuff. It's their time of the year. And to celebrate and commemorate that, we've got this poster here, a Halloween Blood Roof poster, 36 by 24 inches as the size. Sale is ending November 1st, and it's Blood Roof going off against, looks like a bunch of vampires and werewolves. You've got the graveyard imagery. I'm not sure if you can see it that well on here, but you got some graveyard imagery right there. And of course, you've got Blood Roof using her powers against a werewolf. So I'm really excited for Blood Roof to get into all the supernatural horror stuff with her character. And this is just a really nice tease. A limited edition foil stamp. I'm sure it'll be very nice. I'm not necessarily going to get in on it, but it's definitely a really cool piece of art. And for those who enjoy collecting posters, I'm sure this is going to be a great one to add to the collection. But moving on, there's another pretty exciting announcement. So there's a canonized charity auction. Basically, you can go on and bid to, get an opportunity to be canonized in the Rippaverse. There will be about, I think, 3 to 4 panels you will appear in, and you become part of the Rippaverse canon. Of course, part of the code of ethics for the Rippaverse is that the canon actually matters and is supposed to mean something, so it's not going to get retcons in the next issue if you do get canonized. And of course, all the proceeds go to St. Jude, so you start with all the bids, or you start with one bid, and then you bid. It's a typical auction. Of course, all the proceeds will go to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. They do pediatric cancers and other sort of chronic illnesses are the what St. Jude takes care of at no cost to the families, and they can do that because you've got very generous people who donate to St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and this is one of the events that that will benefit St. Jude's. So if you have the money, of course, last time I checked, it was like $375 to do a bid. You can go and do a bid, and of course, you can always just donate less money, $5, $10, $20, whatever you can spare, to St. Jude's if you feel so inclined. But I figured I'd let you all in on this and know about this. It's a bit too expensive for me to make a direct bid on this, but it's definitely a really interesting thing. I love charity events. I love giving back to just the community and society in general. So I love the comic book for kids stuff. Doing stuff with St. Jude is really nice. So I think it's a really fun thing, and of course, it's going to be really fun to see who wins and who gets canonized in Rippaverse. Just like you had with the Ice and #1 campaign, you had people who paid $5,000 to be part of the Rippaverse canon, and seeing all of that hopefully come to fruition if that hasn't already and they just haven't decided to talk about it. It's all really interesting stuff. I love this interaction with the community. Of course, it's giving to a good cause. Like I said, taking care of sick and needy children is always a very fantastic thing to do. Unfortunate that it exists, but hey, that's the human condition, and we can only just make do with what we have. But for that's not a lot of news to go over, but I definitely have more for this episode of Braxcast. We're going to go and transition to me and Andrew Rodriguez, Chief Creative Officer, lead executive editor of the Rippazine. I had him on once before for the 24th episode. He's back for the 35th episode, so hopefully you enjoy the following interview. Welcome, everybody. This is the interview section of the Braxcast, episode 35. You were on here before, Andrew Rodriguez, on the 24th episode of the Braxcast. So why don't you introduce yourself in case anybody doesn't know your exact role of Rippaverse, and we'll get into this interview section of this podcast. And thank you for coming on once again.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, man. What's going on, all you Rippaverse fans out there? Thanks for supporting fan podcasts like this that focus on our growing universe. That's one of the coolest things about doing this. I am Andrew Rodriguez. I am the creative manager, lead editor, and social media manager over at the Rippaverse. I also manage Eric's social media when it comes to video content and things like that. And I manage our creative team. So that deals with artists, it deals with writers, graphics editors, things like that. And I've got my hands and toes in just about everything that we do when it comes to the Rippaverse side stuff. Not Rip Ascend, that's a different thing, but Rippaverse stuff, I'm pretty heavily involved with it at this point. So thank you so much for all the support that you guys have been showing what we do so far. And it's great to be back. Thanks for having me, man.
Fantastic. So this was just posted on social media, so I'm going to do the share screen here on this, and I figured I want to talk about it. So, which characters would you most want to see in a Rippaverse calendar? I'm going to answer this first, and I'll let you get into it. I'd like two, like one that's themed around certain groups of characters, like Alpha Core, Isom, the Hellions, Michael Copper and Leonashi, and then having like a classic pinup ladies of the Rippaverse calendar. And I think doing those two would be the way to go about it. But I'll let you get into your answer on this one.
So this is going to be a two-part answer because I can't give my actual answer as to what I would want on this because NDA. But the next best thing would be I would like something that is Yaira Christmas themed would be the coolest thing for me because she obviously has a wintry aesthetic. She's considered a bit of an ice queen, so it's kind of all written right there for you. Is what I would like to see the most.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I love something like that. And a lot of calendars sell around December. So having like like that would be a fantastic. I think that'd be a fantastic theme thing to as a stocking stuffer. But that's the last thing. So when we had last talked, Rippazine #1 was out, and Rippazine 2 hadn't gotten to the hands of readers yet. And I'm not sure if it was even announced yet. But now we have it. We've gotten it. I've read through. It's a great read, especially that Horseman preview and the story of Saoirse. So why don't you go and talk as being the lead editor on that differences between tackling the first issue versus the second issue, and what are your future plans given the response to both issues of the Represent?
So yeah, real quick, Ripazine is one of my favorite things that we do here because it allows us to test a whole bunch of stuff. It allows us to give people kind of a sampler in terms of previews for some of our releases that we have going on. Our first four releases had previews in Ripazine #1, and our following two main releases had previews in Ripazine #2. It's a great, cheap, affordable entry level into the Rippaverse for people who are new to us and aren't quite certain whether or not they want to drop 25 bucks on a book from a company that they just heard about, which is entirely fair, and I can sympathize and empathize with that. So that's one of the reasons why we have the Ripazine. $7, get you the standard cover, get you some previews, get you some original stories as well, and some other fun stuff. The other stuff is more for our traditional Rippaverse fans. So when you have those in-universe articles and interviews from the perspectives of some of the other characters, a lot of times those offer nuggets into the psyche and the personality of a lot of characters. Even if they're talking about information that doesn't on its face seem like it pertains to something in particular, the way that they're saying it actually is important because the way they're saying is what will inform you of a lot of that character's personality, a lot of that character's character. But the main change, because this has been a learning experience for us, because doing a full comic book, full graphic novel that's anywheres from 86 to 112 pages so far has been our range, it seems. And doing a magazine, which you're trying to put out more regularly, is a different beast. There are a lot more people involved. However, the nice thing is it's a little more condensed. We can do quick turnarounds on it. So this is something that our plans to answer that question moving forward is to try and make it a bit of a quarterly release. That's our goal. If we can consistently have a quarterly release for it, that's great value for our fans. It's great value for our Rippaverse members. So if you're a Rippaverse member on our website, even at the base $5 tier, you get the most recent magazine release for free. and that's a $7 magazine. So you're getting kind of a discount on that, but even more so, you're getting it for free because that's on top of the other benefits that you get, and those benefits will be increasing and continue to be tailored and honed and tempered as we go. Not to mention the fact that more members means more animations, so that's something that I think is really highly worth the price of entry.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, that's all really well and good. And I think, you mentioned animation. Let's get into animation. So, what has been your experience with the formation of Rippaverse Studios? Because it seems to be like using the internet to bring a bunch of animators together who are working remotely rather than having to pay for like a studio somewhere in California, San Jose, like the companies of the past would do. So, how much experience do you have with Rippaverse Studios from its inception and the independent projects? Because I know the first Isom 2 trailer was made in collaboration with Ember Studios, and Eric has talked about stuff being more in house. So, what do you know of the process? And, of course, what can you say that is an NDA, right?
Well, as far as what I can say about the process, it's been a really cool experience. That's for sure. The current state of accessibility for entertainment, due to the internet age and all of that, makes doing projects like comic book creation, like magazine creation, like animation creation, so much more accessible than it ever has been before. I mean, there used to be a time where you had to, there are still artists that work traditionally, like the artist who worked on Salvage for Rippazine #1. He works traditionally. But many artists these days work digitally, which means they can quickly email out or put into a Dropbox or a OneDrive folder or anything that's the equivalent thereof, and you can get that work so much more quickly. You can get feedback on it so much more quickly, and that really expedites the process in a lot of ways. Animation isn't altogether too dissimilar. With the animation side, we did work with one studio for the animation for ISOM 2. We then grew from that, and we now do our animations with an in-house studio. Now, in-house isn't necessarily in our warehouse, but we do have a dedicated team now who is on board and on tap for any time we decide we want to do an animation. Now, Eric has mentioned before on his stream that the animations going forward are primarily going to be something that is a benefit to Rippaverse members, insofar as we're going to get more of them as we grow, commensurate with the number of memberships that we get. Because animation isn't cheap, but we also want it to be something that's rewarding for our members. So that kind of makes them a contributor to the process, not in the way of a crowd fund, because they're still getting other benefits as well. This is just one more thing that allows us to say, okay, so we don't have to divert necessarily funds directly from the books for this, because the books we would prefer to continue to reinvest into the books. You don't want to, we're not trying to be Disney where we're subsidizing everything else with, money from the parks or whatever, right? So it's been a really cool process to watch, seeing the storyboards. Our internal concept artist, Marcos, who has designed the vast majority of the characters in our universe so far, with very few exceptions, he has done a lot of the storyboards for our animations, which is cool because that's him getting the chance to kind of flex and develop another skill that he can put in his tool belt and continue to grow as an artist as well.
Yeah, no, that's all really interesting, and I love the process of storyboarding and animation. The traditional animation is a real art form, and that Horseman trailer was absolutely stellar, and those action
Probably our best one
sequences.
yet.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. So I'd love to see a full-on show for something like Horseman. Of course, $5,000, you get the first episode. A season gets greenlit at 10,000 members. Sorry if I said dollars. And Dean King would voice Horseman. Although we didn't really get to see that, it was more focused on Tuna. He had the
Mhm.
biggest presence, and I think I said this all before. I think it's all casted really well. The direction would just need to improve a little bit. But I'm sure someone like with Dean King being able to bring like voice acting directors and all these sort of people to make a full show. So, how much has Dean talked about with the Horseman show, like this sort of that behind the scenes enthusiasm about like getting that administrative stuff done? I know it's not anywhere close to happening, but it's just like a really interesting thing that really stuck out when the Horseman was revealed with that trailer of the show. That's what you really got the guys focused on a lot. So there's a lot of enthusiasm around that. And I just wanted to see like how able would you guys be able to build upon that when I think it inevitably happens.
So, just as with how we handle our book launches, where we launch the books when they're either in the warehouse or already at the printer. With this animation, things are being prepped on the back end so that when we hit that moment, we can green light and say, okay, let's do it, get to work. Like everything else will be already a lot of the pre-prep kind of pre-production type stuff has already begun because we want to be able to do quick turnarounds on things. Animation takes time, just as with creating a comic book takes time. So we try to be ahead of the game on as much as we can without getting too far ahead of ourselves and you know planning and already animating out a full, I don't know, 10 episode season or something like that, because that would be costly, but it would also not behoove us in terms of efficiency for our time because we're not there yet. But we are doing a lot of the prep already that will expedite the process once we are ready to do that. And that's kind of how we tend to operate. That actually is very similar to how we handle our books. We'll greenlight a bunch of projects in terms of scripts, and then as we get nearer and nearer to when we think we want to launch those, then we'll start saying, okay, now let's get these people going on pencils, inks, colors, all of that. So it is a tiered process, but it's a fun process to watch behind the scenes and kind of sit back here and say, "Oh man, I'm really looking forward to when we can greenlight this because this is going to be something really cool." As far as Dean Kane goes, he and Eric have had a number of conversations, and we have a lot more voice actors who are interested in working with us than people probably realize, because a lot of voice actors, with very few exceptions, um, don't tend to get paid a ton. That's why you'll see on like their IMDb's, they'll have 1.5 million things on their credits list because they're taking whatever jobs they can get. Because for the most part, again, they aren't getting paid like your typical, you know, A-list Hollywood celebrity. Nobody in the voice acting industry is getting paid Robert Downey Jr. money. Um, so there are a lot of conversations being had. We've got a lot of plans moving forward. We have a lot of characters who we are pretty confident would hit very well with our audience in terms of animation. It's just a matter of being able to justify the expense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And voice acting is like one of the very much frowned upon, things in acting. I think it definitely goes for like live action first. That's like the bread and butter of Hollywood. And you've got these elitists that have this very much like, they frown and look down upon animation. So the actors who are making animations or integral to that, the voice acting, they don't have that respect. So they, feel easier giving them the short end of the stick. And then of course you've got all the voice acting that goes on for the corporate stuff. I was just watching this video about someone who was the voice actor for Bluetooth talking about how like Siri's voice actor got screwed over in terms of getting compensated. So it's just this is like general in terms of voice acting for whatever you do. They're not fairly compensated, and you guys definitely are willing to fairly compensate people. So I think it's going to bring a lot of genuine talent, and I'm sure it's going to be people who can actually be talented, but they might not necessarily be known because it's not like people know people for voice acting, but it's
Mhm.
genuinely a skill, and if you make it worth people's time, then they're going to come and grow. So that's really what I hope to see with that. But I think I want to talk about the Horseman book itself, right? Because this is the first book from the Rippaverse that's not conceptualized by Eric July in some way. Horseman's unique or not unique in the sense, but a creation between Joe Bennett and Chuck Dixon, I guess unique in that sense. So the process of that, how it got introduced, and what you're most excited for the fans when they get Horseman later on next month, being November, right?
So, as you said, the Horseman is the first published character in our universe that's being put out that was not created by our illustrious leader, um, Eric July. So he created as far as like your main characters, everybody that you've seen thus far was the brainchild of Eric. Like the man really put his head down and created a ton of characters, and he's allowed other writers to play in his sandbox and play with those toys in his sandbox. And thankfully we have a bunch of fantastic writers on staff and contracted that are both capable, talented enough, and willing to respectfully operate within the bounds of Eric's sandbox, because that's an important thing. And one of the things we've complained about a lot when it comes to the mainstream, when you get artists coming in and writers coming in who don't care about playing in somebody else's sandbox. They didn't help build this. They're just wanting to kick out all the sand and put in their own and put in their own toys and throw out all the other ones and try and pretend like they created this thing. Thankfully, we have people who respectfully don't operate that way. And so the Horseman was a character that Joe went to Chuck and said, you know, I feel like the Rippaverse needs this kind of character. We need a a gruff, gritty, uh, brutal, street level vigilante type character. This guy's not a superhero. He's he's a badass, but he's not a superhero. Doesn't have any accept abilities. He just relies on his wits. He relies on his skills that he's honed through his training and his history. You guys will learn a bit more about that when you read Welcome to Florist Park, which, if you haven't pre ordered already, I highly encourage you to do so, because this book is a fast paced, high octane, awesome read. Everything that was great about Chuck and Joe's Alpha Core #1 is like that, but more, and arguably better, and definitely more brutal. So if you like characters like Punisher, like Daredevil, he does have powers, but that's different in terms of like overall tone of the story. Characters like Batman, things like that. Those gritty street level vigilante heroes who aren't kicking down, brick walls and can't put holes in the ground with their foot. This guy isn't Superman, but he's a cool character nonetheless. And I think readers are going to respond incredibly well to him. Y'all have obviously responded incredibly well to the collection itself. Thank you so much for getting Chuck and Joe's book over 675 grand. That's insane. We were not expecting or intending this collection to pop off like that, but we're incredibly grateful that it has. We're grateful to all the fans. The awesome thing about characters like the Horseman and him getting the response that he has is that showcases, I think, something that I like to think about pretty often, which is character archetypes. And what is it about certain types of characters that fans really enjoy that can be taken and repackaged and repurposed to create something fresh and something new? So, like I was saying just a moment ago, people who like Batman, people who like the Punisher, things like that, we do this with our friends and family all the time when we go see a movie or we play a game or we read something that we really like, and we go to somebody that's in our lives and we say, hey, I know you like this thing, you might also like this thing as well because of that. It's the same type of mentality within character creation. The trick is, how do you take the things that are kind of that baseline expectation of that character archetype, that gritty street level vigilante? And how do you take the various aspects of that, various facets of that character archetype that people really like and people expect? And how do you kind of amalgamize bits and pieces that you want to utilize to create something new, something fresh? People who like those characters will absolutely feel that influence with the Horseman. But the Horseman isn't Batman. The Horseman isn't the Punisher. He's different but familiar. And that's how you do a character archetype properly. And Chuck, obviously, that's kind of right in his wheelhouse because he's written all those characters. He knows what the heck he's doing. And Joe Bennett, his art on Alpha Core #1 was already stellar. It's even better on Horseman. They've got another project coming out that is yet to be announced, that I encourage you all to look forward to, because their work on that is even better still. This
Oh,
team is a dynamic duo that just gets better every single time they work together.
yeah, no, I agree so much. And Joe Bennett's two-page spreads and the action and just the amount of detail he brings with the pencil work is insane. And of course, Chuck Dixon has got just such a great writer. Alpha Core was really well paced, and from what I read of Horseman, it looks like they just have that energy and it's just going to, meld together. And what I'm really excited for is Alpha Core number two, because of reading Yaira number one and the implications for Alpha Core after that. So just to see how Chuck Dixon is going to tackle that, and of course, all the things are unannounced. It seems like you've got this new talent that's coming in, like Michael Montanet from the ISM2 fan contest, working on Blood Proof, and then you've got titans in the comic book industry on the creative side. Joe Bennett has a huge catalog of work that he's worked on, and of course Chuck Dixon is just foundational to that like darker era of comics that people really like, and you've got Mike Barron, of course, and then. Yeah, I think that's. I think I'll let you talk about that because I'm kind of losing my train of thought.
No, you're good. It speaks to a lot of the issues within the mainstream industry that we have access to all these guys, even though some of these guys are actually still getting work. Not all of them, in fact, not most of them, but some of them are still getting work in the mainstream as well. Some of them will get tapped, or at least they have in recent months or years. They'll get tapped like, hey, could you do a cover? Hey, could you do a 4 or 6 page interior sequentials in X book, right? Um, and that's the power of the talent that we're able to pull. The fact that we've got guys like Chuck Dixon and Mike Barron and Joe Bennett and Will Conrad and all of these other people wanting to work with us really speaks to, I think, their creative passion and really hammers home the fact that we're onto something. And all of our releases are this is something that fans have told us pretty consistently, that every single release we put out feels more polished, reads more polished, looks more polished. The process in terms of ordering and fulfillment becomes incrementally more polished each time as well. And that's great because we started off okay in some areas, great in others, and then we had some work to do in others still. And that gave us groundwork and framework to grow on. And that's fantastic because now we can look back at mistakes that we've made in the past and be like, look how far we've come. We can look at the launch and fulfillment when we get there next month for Horseman and compare that to ISOM 1 and ISOM 2 and even, Alpha Core and Yaira and Gooding before that. So it's a lot of growth that we get to experience and in a very short period of time. We've experienced a type of growth in just 2 years that usually is something you would attribute to more like a 5-year period for a lot of new companies. So it's really cool to watch. It's really cool to be a part of. And I'm really excited. We put out a lot of releases this year, but I'm even more excited for 2025 because we've got we've got one hell of a slate
Oh yeah,
for everybody.
yeah, definitely. I'm really excited for ISOM number three. Hopefully sooner than 25 would be a great holiday closeout. But whenever it comes, I just want like that nice conclusion to the ill-advised arc. But I think talk about the last topic. Why don't you talk about the plan specifically for this month, since you guys are doing a whole bunch charity auction, launching the ISOM statue, Space Cons coming up. So there's a lot in the immediate terms this month of October, the question, the trivia for the 31 days. And then, of course, talk a little bit about what you're planning on for the holiday season in 2025. Of course, you're going to be, as vague as you possibly can, NDA, Andrew, right? But what you can say, please say it now, and then I think we'll close off. It's been a great interview so far.
Yeah, of course. Again, thanks for having me. So, yes, as you said, October has been a very condensed month for us. We've had a lot of stuff that we're working on, a lot of stuff that's, launched this month, a lot of initiatives. We've got the charity auction going on right now, which benefits St. Jude's Children's Hospital. So please, if y'all are watching this, go consider bidding over there. The prize, all of the money goes directly towards St. Jude's. Rippaverse receives none of that. All that we're involved in terms of the charity and the prizes is the graphics that we created and what the actual prize is, which is getting canonized in the Rippaverse. So much like we did with ISOM 1's campaign, where we had that tier where you could get canonized into the Rippaverse, and to the people who jumped in on that, that is coming. Okay, be on the lookout. That will bear out very soon. But this is separate from that. So if the same people who got canonized via the ISOM 1 campaign decide that they want to get canonized again, they can do so if they bid on this auction. So I highly encourage people to do that. It's going to do great work for kids in need. So please consider that. We do have the trivia going on right now, the Halloween themed 31 Days of Halloween trivia contest. That's been a ton of fun. The Saska sisters did a great job whipping up all those questions. And I'm really looking forward to the results of that because the prize is really wicked cool. Okay. You don't want to miss out on this. And if you need to be a Rippaverse member in order to receive the email that will contain the link to the actual quiz itself. So, those who have been posting in the comments, we appreciate the engagement. However, the actual quiz itself, what's going to count towards this prize, will be in your email if you are a Rippaverse member. And that will be sent out, I believe, on the 31st or the 1st. So definitely take advantage of that. We did launch the ISOM, Young ISOM statue. No, Young ISOM isn't a title change. It's literally just because he's younger in the statue, because it's based off of Kanan White, our illustrious art director's cover D for ISOM 2, which depicted a younger ISOM from his earlier days. Exactly right there. Beautiful Kanan White cover, as is everything that he does. And they based that statue, that resin statue, off of his work, which he actually didn't know about until we told him. And then he flipped and he was so excited. He absolutely loves how it turned out because Kanan, as any artist worth their salt ought to be, is very picky with the presentation of his work. And so he loves how it turned out. We love how it turned out. And we hope you guys give it a shot. It's definitely a little bit more affordable than our Gyro resin statue. It's slightly smaller, but not by much. It's still a foot tall. So definitely jump in on that. And then, yeah, we've got a lot of releases coming up. We've got some Ripascend stuff planned. Jay's book is coming up, Achromatic Chronicles Green. So be on the lookout. I can't give you the exact date yet because NDA, but it is soon. We've obviously got Bloodruth #1 by the Saskas coming, and we have a whole slew of more books that haven't been announced yet. You guys will hear more about very soon. I can't say what it is, naturally, NDA. However, if y'all are at SpaceCon, which is going to be next weekend, the Saturday panel, which will have Eric, Star Wars Theory, D-Day Cobra, and Gary, that will contain a special Rippaverse announcement. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited for that. So getting into that's going to be a really interesting thing. But I think with Young Isom, I'd love for that to be a comic book series. I'm sure you can't say anything about that. But the idea of having that be like the zero issue and having that be a mini series for Isom is something that really appeals to me much more than just having like a simple zero issue to explain the origin of Isom.
Something
Uh,
that leads up and ends with his uh, getting his butt kicked by Shadron or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. So it's starting with how Isom became an Accept, because he trained into it, and then ending with that fight with Shadron as a miniseries and calling it Young Isom, especially having the statue as Isom's first statue ever. I think would be a really cool thing for the fans, and that's something I talked about when Young Isom was announced, or the statue was announced from Iron Studios, and that's really how I would like it to be. Of course, I'm sure you can't say anything about that. I'm not even sure if that's like in the works, but that's just like my idea. I want to throw it out there as much
That
as
would be pretty
possible.
cool.
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool. And going back to the Ripazine, we get to test out stuff like that. Maybe we do a series of shorts that are exclusive to the Ripazine and then collect them later on in a trade paperback format that deal with younger ISOM. Maybe there are a lot of characters in our universe that people want more of, but maybe we don't see them as necessarily justifying a full 80 to 120 page book themselves. Okay, so maybe you want 16 pages on Braxwell. Maybe you want 16 pages on Ingrid Valdez. Maybe you want a little bit more about whoever character. That's what we can do with these these don't always have to involve brand new characters. They can, and that's really fun to do because this acts as a great testing ground for that to gain, some insight in terms of seeing and measuring engaging audience reception. But we can do other stuff with the magazines as well. We can put in shorts on other characters. Maybe a younger ISOM story ends up being one of those shorts.
Okay, well, I'll speculate about that, over time. But yeah, with the Ripazine, I think the idea of using it to give, characters that don't justify the full graphic novels and especially series their own sequential arc consistently, I think that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to the Ripazine. So, I think even if you're not introducing new characters, at least having one short comic in the Ripazine is going to be someone that has a lot of value because people want to read stories. That's the whole point of comics as a medium, and that's why people get into it. I think that's what the reverse is about. So having that even in the entry, the first tier of getting into the reverse in terms of how cheap it can be, having those stories in there consistently is a great thing. And I think what you mentioned was absolutely fantastic. But I don't really have anything else I want to ask you or pick your brain about that, isn't NDA'd. Of course, I'd love for you to spill all the beans, but you're not going to do that. You're very composed. So if you have anything else to say to the fans about the Rippaverse before we sign off, I'd love for you to do it now.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for watching the podcast. Braxcast is an awesome part of our fandom, and we appreciate Joker doing this for us. Um, if you haven't done so already, please pre-order Horseman Welcome to Florist Park. Please consider the charity auction for St. Jude's. Getting canonized is a really, really cool prize, but helping kids who need it is even more rewarding. So please consider doing that. If you haven't already gotten in on Ripazine number 2, grab that. Only $7 at base. Ripazine number 1 is still available as well. So for those of you who are even longtime Rippaverse fans already, but you haven't checked out the zines, consider doing so. $14 between the two of them if you're just getting in on the base cover. That's super cheap, and you'll get the original stories, Salvage and Sersha, both written by Eric July, the first being illustrated by Bart Sears, and the second by our own Cannon White. Highly encourage grabbing those. And guys, we've got so much down the pipeline for y'all. Can't wait to share more of it with you. But for now, NDA, I promise I'm on your side. Mostly, kind of, sometimes.
Fantastic. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and keep up. I'll keep doing this week after week, of course, solo or with guests. And I'd love to interview any Rippaverse staff. So my DMs and email are always open for that. But I'm going to sign off now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. This was a fantastic conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Always enjoy being here. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Yep. Okay, that was my interview with Andrew Rodriguez. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this one, and hopefully, you come back next week for the next episode of the Braxcast. Joker is out. Thank you for tuning in to the Braxcast. Be sure to like, comment, follow, and subscribe to keep up with the Rippaverse.